Welcome to Take Notice, Amplifying Black Stories. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Allison Preisinger-Heggins. To begin, we will take a moment to recognize, to take notice of the voices that are so often unheard. Land acknowledgement statements are an important part of honoring those whose land we now live and work on. I have chosen to begin each episode this way to spark ideas and keep these conversations in the front of our minds so that we may learn how to do better. I would like to acknowledge the land on which I created this recording and the recording of the interview in this episode. I would like to show gratitude to the traditional ancestral land of the Tulalip, Snohomish, Stillaguamish, Saxuatl, Shoalwater Bay, and Chinook tribes. Recognizing that these names are not the original names of the peoples of these areas, as I continue to learn how to better acknowledge Native people of these lands, I will adjust the wording at the beginning of each episode. I encourage listeners to research the land on which you live and are listening right now, recognizing this is just the beginning. Happy New Year! Welcome to 2021. Welcome to new episodes of Take Notice. Thank you for being with us. Hopefully the holidays treated you well despite the unusual situation we are all in still. So hopefully you're able to carry on some traditions despite everything and maybe create some new sweet ones as well. I will keep our intro today brief so that we can get right to the conversation I had with Melany Bell. I look forward to meeting Melany in person one day because we connected in just this really cool way, and I just kind of got lost in our conversation, which is not a bad thing at all. She's so interesting. She has a background in so many different things and is definitely not limited in believing that she can only just focus on one thing in life. So it's amazing to listen to, and so I'm excited for you to hear our conversation. Melany is an artist and scientist. She says the work she does comes through intervented holographic learning tech for artists and amateurs. Our connected spaces, and where there is negative space for interpretation, finds shape, finds sound, frequencies frequently found being us on pages. She teaches and trains, recreating, representing, and reflecting the state of a mind for the race to be human. She is a wonderful human and a creative, interesting human that I think you will enjoy listening to. So please enjoy my conversation with Melany Bell. Take Notice would like to take the time to acknowledge Black-owned businesses, organizations, and artists. If you have a suggestion of who we should highlight during our episodes, please find us on social media or visit our website. Take Notice invites you to follow, learn from, and support Black Lives Matter Seattle-King County or a chapter near you. Black Lives Matter Seattle-King County is a social advocacy organization fighting for the protection and liberation of Black life through advocacy and direct action. The organization lifts up community voices. In a matter of weeks, volunteers raised and granted $250,000 to Black media, Black legal aid, and other Black community organizations. They center leadership on Black femmes, women, queer, and trans people. Black Lives Matter Seattle-King County's fight is collective, urgent, and endurant. To learn more and support this organization, please visit blacklivesseattle.org or find a chapter near you. Good morning, Melany. Thank you for joining me on Take Notice. I'm so excited to have a conversation with you today and hear your story, and I'm really glad that we are connected. How are you this morning?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe we can start with hearing a bit about where you grew up and who you were surrounded by.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up here in Seattle, Washington, where I came back in 2008, but was away for a while. We started in West Seattle. We went to Olympia Lacey. I went to elementary school there, and then junior high and high school was mostly in Kent, Washington, when it was a
Mm-hmm.
cow town, and it was all white.
Mm.
So I don't know. Are you familiar with A Raisin in the Sun, the Lorraine Hansberry story?
I don't know that I am. Tell me about it.
Well, Lorraine Hansberry, as I'm sure you know, is a pretty famous playwright because she was one of, I think, the first Black woman on Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
And the implications of that were rich and deep in my growing up. But the play that she wrote was about zoning, some of the same problems we have today with gentrifying neighborhoods here in Seattle. were still
Mm-hmm.
going on when I was growing up, and she grew up in the 40s and 50s. So this wonderful play that gets redone all over the world, really, it's been translated in several different languages, is a sort of a basis of the new Jim Crow or the old Jim Crow and Jane Crow that Black and Negro and Indigenous people, and of course all to a degree, people are going through that sort of trauma of othered, right? Marginalized. So we were going through that in our neighborhood when we were trying to get to the best schools. And remember in the 70s, that was, they had just killed Dr. King. They had killed Malcolm X. They had killed F. Kennedy. And Angela Davis, was walking around with a bulletproof vest on, being hunted for wanting children to go to school safely. So I'm
Mm.
born during that time period. And white folks don't want us in their neighborhoods, but we just can't care anymore. You know, we just have to
Mm.
get to a safer space where they won't invade and lynch us and burn down our home because it's in their neighborhood. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of people accuse, I guess, the bougie black folks of running away from the hood, but in fact, we knew a little bitty secret that it's really hard to hate the person that's living right next door to you that makes the same money as you, that went to the same university. You have literally no excuse to say they're not equal.
Mm.
And we left one
Right.
another alone in those neighborhoods. But we also had the Black church, and I went to Bethel Christian Church in the CD and Faith Deliverance Church, and that's now out in Renton, but it used to be in the CD, and Grace
Mm.
Apostolic Temple. And these are all Pentecostal churches. These are all, from Gullah Geechee to the indigenous Cherokee, Blackfoot, Chippewa, more of the what we think of as Negro featured indigenous Americans. So
Mm.
that's where I come from. My mother is from New Orleans,
Mm-hmm.
and so we have all those stories. My father is from the Arkansas migration from the Bell
Oh, okay.
Plantation. That's still there today. There's a Bell that's the like police chief in England,
Oh.
Arkansas, where my father grew up until he was around 6 or 7.
Hmm. Really?
Yeah. So
Wow.
that's where I come from. The Black church was our safety net and where we could hold information from back home where we were not wanted. We simply just had to be in a safer neighborhood after 500 years of trying to deal with people that, still today, Breonna Taylor and George Floyd us. It was just a safer bet that they wouldn't burn down the house next to them because we're literally connected, you know.
Right. Hmm.
So my parents were very brave, you know. Um, it wasn't a cop out at all. It was the most terrifying thing that they could possibly think of doing was living in a white neighborhood and
Right.
allowing those folks to attempt to teach their children, you know.
Mm.
So that's how I grew up. It was way easier than how my mom and dad grew up. I'll tell you that. I didn't
Mm.
see I didn't see one lynched body. I didn't see one Derek
Right.
Chauvin kneeling for 10 minutes, I didn't see
Mm.
that.
Your father, you said, grew up in Kansas. Was it Kansas?
Arkansas,
Arkansas.
yeah.
That's where
Yeah,
my brain went, I guess.
yeah, yeah.
Arkansas. How about your mom? Where did she grow up?
Louisiana, New Orleans.
Oh, you said that. Yes. Okay.
Mhm.
What brought your parents out to Washington State?
Well,
Do you know?
initially, both of my grandparents, maternal and paternal, moved to California because this
Mm,
is
okay.
supposedly where there was more freedom.
Mm,
And although when they moved there, they didn't have a television, nobody had a television, just when my parents were growing up, not even a
mhm,
black and white. They might have accumulated one by the time they were 13, right? And you could go to
mm,
the pictures, which were still segregated, even in the Bay Area where they were both at. It's just
mm,
the sign wasn't up, blacks only. You just went to the one in your neighborhoods. You know what I mean?
mm, mhm, mm.
So they both met at San Francisco State, and my father was a football player, and he got a scholarship to the University of Washington.
Oh,
And
okay.
back then, and I'm sure it just recently stopped, But the college athletes were really pampered like professional athletes, and they paid
Oh, yeah.
your living expenses. It was carte blanche. You got a car, everything, you know.
Wow.
So they were just, this is before the NFL had begun, remember, in the 60s, or it was just
Mm.
getting started. So my father was a part of that first draft of the first draft for the NFL.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and he and O.J. Simpson and Marcus Allen and AC, they all grew up together in the same neighborhood and are all
Mm.
good friends. Um,
Wow. Yeah.
but yeah, they moved up here for university. This was one of the only places in the country that they were letting Black folks go to university relatively
Oh,
easily if
okay.
you were a football player.
Right.
You know what I mean? But my
Hmm.
mother was a concert pianist. She was a dancer. She did ballet, tap, jazz, all of it,
Oh, awesome.
and had planned on being an artist, but met this guy that was like, hey, you'll be my girlfriend. I can get you a full ride to the University of Washington. So, of course, I've never been married because nobody's ever offered me a full ride
Right.
scholarship.
That is a high bar there.
It's
Yeah.
a high bar. It's a high bar.
Oh, goodness. That's great. Mm,
But that's their story. From the
that's
South,
beautiful. Yeah. Hmm.
and just moved here for more opportunity.
Sure. Yeah. And you grew up in the Kent area, and what I know about the Kent area now, and for listeners who may not know, Kent is a little bit south of Seattle.
Exactly.
Um, what I know about Kent now is that it's one of the most diverse cities
Hmm.
in the state,
Yeah.
and so that must have been much different when you were growing
Yeah.
up if it was majoritively white. So, did you grow up, or were you in Kent through? Did you say through high school and then
Mhm.
after, or did you move away? Did you have a
Well,
comparison of it then to now?
yeah, my parents were married for 19 years and then split. My dad went back to the Bay, but my
Mm,
mom stayed here in Washington. So I finished up high school here in Kent. But again, I had that, real yin yang experience, that both and sort of African or indigenous principle like uh, experience with the Black church and the all white school. So by the time I was 18, I was a professional musician. I
oh,
had
okay.
been in like three or four choirs while I was in high school because for me, memorizing books of the Bible growing up, understanding rhetorical devices and critical thinking from the Black church, all of those basic, mathematic principles like the second law of thermodynamics. For
Mm,
every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. That's something my father was telling me, who is now a pastor. And he's saying
mm,
that's you reap what you sow. You plant
mhm.
a seed of corn, you get a big stalk of hundreds and hundreds back, because that's how
Yeah.
good the universe is at showing you're taken care of. That abundance is real.
Mhm.
And so when you know things like that and you grow up, after they've killed off the guy that says, hey, the chickens are coming home to roost. We really love you. We don't want you to get this back, what you're doing to us. You know what I mean? When James Baldwin is pleading in the fire next time to say, hey, this innocent so called country has set us in ghettos in which, in fact, it intended that we should perish, in his letter to his nephew James. Growing up reading those things from all the Black folks that had, left the Booker T and the Frederick Douglass debate. They were like, we need education wherever we can get it. We also need to know how white folks think, to be
Mm,
honest. We
mhm.
were terrified and terrorized into being terrified of white folks.
Right.
And we had to drop that. We had made them into the devil itself on earth with all that wicked power. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
As
Mhm.
if. So our faith had been challenged really by going into the fray. So, anyhow, but being from the
Yeah.
South, you have those roots within you. You're never without your ancestors. Trademark 2019 Melany Bell. You're never without your ancestors.
I love that. That's great.
You know what I mean? You've always got
Mhm.
them in you. You just got to listen to that wisdom. When your mom and dad say, hey, it's better to not look in that fence next door and think that the grass is greener, right? And the Bible
Mm,
tells you, hey, don't envy your neighbor's wife and stuff. And you get
Hmm.
out of the house, and because you're 18 and you're a professional singer, you don't have to listen. You don't have to go to church no more, and you don't have to do none of that, right? But doesn't
Hmm.
it make sense to not be jealous of what somebody else got on their plate?
Yeah.
Because isn't there
Right.
enough food for all of us?
Right.
You
Hmm.
know? And so all those simple lessons, it was like, as a rebellious teenager with your own money in your pocket, you sure do want to rebel, but it just goes against common sense to do so. You know what I mean? So that just that bit of critical thinking of you're getting, comedic wisdom, ancient wisdom from that book, the what I call the KJV version of the Bible is the Cliff Notes to science
Hmm.
and philosophy, sociology, history, how to get along, and it's written in every culture and every language, and they apply their own foods to
Hmm.
that methodology, but it's very ununique as I go through life, and my parents tried to impress that upon me as well. That this story is the truth all over the world. We just speak English.
Right. And you mentioned going to church in the CD, and
Hmm.
I'm familiar with the CD area, but
Yeah.
others may not. Some listeners may not be. So, can you kind of describe that area and what it was
Well,
like going to church there? And
yeah. See, have you ever been to Nebraska?
once I've been to Nebraska
Did you
once.
go to Lincoln at all?
Mm, I don't think so. I was in Omaha mostly.
Oh, okay, yeah. So Omaha is actually kind of a big city compared to how
Mm,
Seattle felt back then. But back
mm,
then, it was just a tiny little town. So when you were in the Central District, it wasn't anything like it is today.
yeah,
You every
yeah.
every home there was owned by a black person. Again, there was no sign saying you couldn't live in the neighborhood. You just knew you weren't allowed. You had to make an excessive amount of money and have, like my father did, a master's degree in the 70s,
Mm.
which may as well have been tenured professorship, for a black man who had been a
Mm.
football player. So he grew up with like Bruce Harrell, our old city council president.
Oh, okay.
And like he and my uncle Jerry and my mom and their wives, we would explore Seattle together. So the
Mhm.
the CD was something where we would find there was a restaurant called Helen's. Do you remember Helen's Soul Food?
I don't. I think I'm more familiar with the last 10 years of Seattle, and then
Yeah.
growing up, I would pop down there, but I grew up north of Seattle,
Well,
so
it was before Zell's. Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
Well, Helen's Soul Food Restaurant
Uh-huh.
was fantastic, and there was Latif's Barbecue, and there were a couple other barbecues, but they weren't as good as Latif's. But we had we had like a Japanese dentist who had been interned, or I call it what it is, put into concentration camps here in the
Right.
United
Yeah.
States, but had come out
Yeah.
and become a dentist and lived in our neighborhood. So it was a real, not super multicultural. It was really Asian and Black, believe it or
Mhm.
not.
Mm.
And we were very into each other's stuff. You know what I mean? We
Yeah.
we lived on Spokane Street there for a while, right by the entrance to the highway. We were going to the same grocery stores as kids in the ID, and we ate ginger, like pickled ginger and pickled plums, and rice balls and nori and all that stuff. We
Mm.
loved it, and because of that, our brain isn't the same. We're wired differently, because
Mm.
of the bravery of our parents to come this far from home. Way, as close to Canada,
Yeah.
as you could get to escape
Right?
just in case. But
Mhm.
this idea that it's ever been easy to be indigenous or brown or black in this country is false. And that's what you learn by living, by the living.
Right.
Um, and we're just now in 2020 coming clean about that.
Mhm.
So that journey from the South, that great migration that Jacob Lawrence has painted for us, and August Wilson, they're also from Seattle, or well, lived the bulk of his career here in Seattle when
Mhm.
he was writing. Both of those amazing authors were trying to chronicle our ways of knowing. So by the time I got to university and I was a professional singer, dancer, and actor, by the time I was 18, okay, that's how great our ancestors are. That in one
Mm,
generation, after they murdered Dr. King and had Angela on the run and Tupac's mother or auntie in jail or her on the run and all of these things are concurrently occurring while white people haven't figured out yet, or I should say the systemic racism that keeps capitalism going hasn't figured out how to integrate our schools and keep Black kids back at the same time. So I didn't know all this time. I just tried to take a cooking class. I have a BFA from SUNY Purchase College of the
mm.
Arts in New York.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was also a Dean's List student at Kentridge, and I went to three different high schools. My parents got divorced while I was in high school. I was freshman class president. I was an overachiever at every level. I had like
Mm.
two required classes by my senior year because I had AP
Oh,
college prepped my way
wow.
there. I was making $10 an hour as a lab assistant for Dr. Jonathan Wright, who wrote Why Stomach Acid is Good for You and introduced me to a whole other mindset, like that of which Dr. Sebi would later, and Queen Afua would later teach me about the human body, how plants work, et cetera, et cetera. But it
Wow.
started with Carver, with my mom saying, "You guys like peanut butter? Black man invented peanut butter. Here's his autobiography."
Mhm.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So our parents engaging in their own lives in that way and continuing to educate themselves. We are the technology, our mind, our consciousness is the technology that creates anything that is so called technology. Even our idea of money, the pretty paper we spend on technology is
Yeah.
coming from that source intellect, that infinite intelligence. And so being taught about that source, that infinitely intelligent source that is unconditionally attempting to give you everything that you want, what you really want, right?
Mhm.
If you don't learn that that is real, that the universe isn't fighting against you, and you can't win fighting against it, you have to be humble, like George Washington Carver, and say, God, just show me the peanut.
Hmm.
Don't tell me anything else. The atom itself is so complex. How could I ask for more than I just learned about this one plant in detail, right?
Yeah.
Because of that, our ways of knowing, which is actually the title of a class that I took at Seattle Central Community College. And
Mhm.
Professor Carl Livingston was teaching law and political science in that, but from the historic point of view of women and people of color. And if you just looked at history and science, from the point of view of
Mhm.
women and people of color, you would be living in an entirely different planet with the technology that literally comes out of the wombed man,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I get very philosophical. Stop me, please.
I'm just in awe of everything that you're saying, but also how much you have accomplished. I was looking through some of the materials that you sent over, and it's just, you're an artist, a musician, a
Mhm.
scientist, and philosopher, so it's just so interesting to hear the breadth of knowledge that you have. And I'm personally super interested in having a conversation with you about music because I'm a musician as well. But
Awesome.
um, but we can do that another time
I know.
more. I
I know.
that 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 pulls me always, and I'm like, wait, this isn't about music. Let's, but it's always interesting.
Yeah.
Though I would love to hear, a little bit about what you did as a singer, and then what kind of moved you to these other pieces, or if it was always that you were interested in. It sounds like you were always interested in all of the things. So, and how that's
Yeah.
kind of informed your path.
If you start studying the infinite, a lot of people have asked me throughout my life, and I'm old now, I'm a middle-aged woman, but throughout my life, just being interested in the idea that there is an infinite source of intelligence and I can keep going, I can never be done taking
Mm,
from this well of information. And
mhm,
so my whole life, I've been so curious about what other people were thinking, reading, doing, who, what, where, when, why did they
mm,
choose that? And so for me, the arts was the only place that I could really ask all of those questions. I wouldn't get pigeonholed into just studying law, just studying biology, chemistry, physics.
Yeah.
I could pretend on a stage that I was a doctor,
Mhm.
right? But I would
Mhm.
actually have to research what that person was feeling, why, how does an intellect get like that? And that really, curiosity. It didn't kill a cat. You know what curiosity for cats got? They have cat cafes. People worship cats. Literally, okay?
That's so true.
Because they're so brilliant. They got us
Yeah.
pampering their butts like you don't know
Right.
what. You know what I mean? They are
Oh,
large and in charge. Cats are brilliant. They don't have 9 lives. They have many more, and we're paying for
mm. Yeah,
them.
totally.
So curiosity really does pay off, and that
Mm.
happens when you have, well, my parents both started off really open-minded, right?
Yeah.
In a sense that all is full of love, and there is opportunity, and things can happen even if your countrymen say you're black, and that's the worst thing that ever happened to anybody.
Mm. Mm.
Even if your
Right.
countrymen say that, you can still live a good life.
Yeah.
And in pursuit of just wanting to enjoy their life, they continue to educate themselves, continue to be curious. And that's why I am the way I am. Musically, my mother again was a concert pianist, and she's in the gospel church when she's pregnant with all of her children.
Mm.
If you've ever learned about, like the Kinsey scale of sexuality, and looked at, oh, I forget, Dr. Spock, that's his name, that was doing all these studies on children's minds, and of course the Nazis.
Mm. Right, right, right.
So
Mhm.
there's all these different methodologies on how to get optimal behavior out of kids. And what my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, Mayola Simon, also Davis, did was give my mother the arts. And so that language, and you just said music takes over. I'll get off on a tangent. Well, music, we are vibration. We are, as defined by Michio Kaku and Neil deGrasse Tyson, living in a holographic universe of strings to a degree, of vibrational realities, vibrational pathways that are creating a lattice, if you will,
Mhm.
of information all around us. And I love to think of those old Pink Panther movies or those super spy movies where a thief is trying to get to the Hope Diamond or the Royal Jewels, and there's all those lasers, and they have to crawl through them and, not touch
Mm.
one of them. And that's a
Right.
little bit like life. When
Yeah.
you're looking for that holy grail of passion, that's gonna really set you off and make you into a superhero of some kind, whether it's John Coltrane or George Washington Carver, whether it's Nina Simone or Oprah
Mm.
Winfrey, you know, Madam
Yeah.
CJ. If it's Zaha Hadid, the great architect, it started with an enormous holy grail of passion that just took over you, right?
Mhm.
So, how do we get there creatively? What does music have to do with that? What does the arts have to do with that? Why are our stories of knowing so important, and so important to be true, to have integrity? Because that lattice, as you're weaving and winding it around and trying to stay in your lane and not get in anybody else's lane, their string, their path, trying not to obstruct someone else or force your opinion on others, you're having a clear path because of that. And
Right.
so when you think of yourself as vibration, as a song in a room, and you get the opportunity to be that song that changes the room rather than when it's unnecessary, the really loud death metal, right? You get that
Oh.
opportunity to be that different kind of song that can soothe, and it's coming specifically from you, from your passion place.
Mhm.
That's why when you say music will take over, it's because it is everything in this
Yeah.
sort of holographic universe. And it also helps you lighten up, not take things so seriously, enlighten.
Mhm.
It can levitate feelings away from you in so many ways and bring them on as
Right. I love that image. I've never thought about it that way.
well. Well, me either. Specific people bring things out of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man. That's such a beautiful image. So, a portion of this project that we're doing, aside from just generally collecting stories, also to hear people's personal encounters with racism if they're
Mhm.
comfortable sharing them. So, if you have a story that you're comfortable sharing now, we could get into that now, or we could move on to the next thing.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
I think it's important because I've been raised to always reflect on myself as blessed. And it's true. When I look at history, I'm really blessed. So racism in my life has been a theoretical thing in most ways. It's an unusual circumstance, I'll tell you that. But again, I had a very yin yang, both and life growing up. However, I'll just give you the most recent version of what
Sure.
I
Yeah.
have lived through. And it's because I keep just blowing past it. I just ignore it like it's pork, as the rappers say. I may be confronted with someone who thinks they're about to be racist, for instance.
Mhm.
But then I just undeniably change their mind in whatever ways their mind is changed as while confronted with me. I don't know the specifics of what is done emotionally to them when they're confronted with somebody that doesn't care that they're racist. You know what I
Mm.
mean?
Mhm.
And they just continue on with their life, being
Right.
wonderful. The most recent example I experienced was I was trying to get my college transcript sent to Seattle Central. They have a wonderful program there for culinary arts, and I wanted to take it. Now, I'm a nutritionist. I have three certifications, one in applied kinesiology, one in neurology or what's called gut and psychology syndrome, and one in basic nutrition and health that applies the anatomy, physiology of the human body, how the body really works, the basic foundations from hydration, digestion, and portion control to mineral uptake and essential fatty acids. So
Mm.
I'm pretty good at school, but I love to keep learning. And I thought, wow, a culinary arts certification from this particular school would just be, the icing on my cake, right? But I currently have over 2,000 pieces of art, of fine
Mm.
art that I've been developing over the last couple of years, while proving the efficacy of my work, the nutrition
Mm.
protocol that I've created.
Okay.
So I'm wanting to take this class, and I have all these certifications, and I have a BFA, and I have a high school diploma, all great grades. You know what I mean? I'm expecting this to be really easy to get into this class with my visual art presentation and my nutrition certification, and the fact that I actually teach cooking as a nutritionist.
Mhm.
I think I'm a slam dunk for this class. They say you are, except for you need to take Math 087 or have your transcripts with your bachelor's on it. I said, okay. Tried to get my transcript sent since March. I've been trying to have my transcript sent to Seattle Central, and I can't get them sent. Guess
Mm.
what I found out when I called, the 87th time?
Mm.
I'm over exaggerating. I called like 10 times.
Yeah.
But the 87 millionth time, that
Right.
I called for my transcript,
Mhm.
I got a young man tell me that my transcripts were incomplete. My 4.2 GPA BFA, that I graduated with honors on the dean's list early in my senior year with a contract to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, the largest rotating repertory theater in the country. But I was an extraordinary student, and I accelerated in every way. Not only could I not get my transcripts sent because they were incomplete in every way, but I was told by SUNY Purchase I was going to have to reapply to the school, pay them again to get them to give me the BFA that I already earned with a 4.2. Now, before you say
Wow.
anything about that, as
Mhm.
far as, did you ever see Scandal, that show Scandal?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm sure you remember the scenes when she said, we have to be 5 times as good, or we have to
Mm.
be twice as good at everything. Right?
Mhm. Yeah.
While I was getting my 4.2, after I graduated high school with divorced parents and a single mom who was raising 6 kids literally on her own without a dime of support with one state job.
Mm.
After I graduated with honors from high school and couldn't get my high school transcripts sent to Seattle Central, I graduated with a 4.2 on the dean's list with honors and a contract to a major theater. You would think after 30 years of being a professional artist with a start like that on the dean's list and everything, that school, either my high school or my university, would have called me for a job. But wait, there's more.
Mm.
While I was getting my 4.2 BFA and graduating with honors early in my senior year, I was sexually assaulted 3 times in college, twice on campus.
Mm.
Okay. So 5 times as good doesn't really cut it for some of us.
Right.
We have to be even better than that. And then you know what happens? They won't even give you your BFA. They won't send your transcripts over. That's racism. That's sexism. That's
Right.
hidden figures. That's more than me that it happened to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's systemic. That's disgusting.
Right.
That's why 700 people in the SUNY system, and I hate to say stuff like this, but 700 people in the SUNY system right now got COVID and they had to shut the SUNY system down.
Mm.
Energy, second law of thermodynamics, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So that see, you will get back what is coming to you in equal measure. Without judgment, you will get back what you have put out, right?
Mm.
In equal measure. How did that affect my life? I couldn't get into the Evergreen State College PhD program. I didn't know why.
Mm.
I
Mm-hmm.
should have been able to because it's a different kind of school and I can prove out my master's as I do my PhD when you have that kind of BFA behind you, but I didn't have that.
Hmm.
This could have affected every single job I applied for when they asked for my credential.
Right.
And all they
Yeah.
had to do as a professional is ask if I had graduated. They don't
Mm-hmm.
even have to see my, transcripts, which are only sent to college, blah, 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 blah. But as
Mm-hmm.
far as I knew for the last 3 years, I was a BFA honor student who got their invitation sent, their graduation, all that stuff sent.
Right.
Wasn't even concerned with the sheet of paper. It's in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's literally impossible for me not to have a BFA in my estimation. But
Yeah.
because of systemic racism and trying to hold people back, and movies like The Hidden Figures and Henrietta Lacks, I'm sure you're familiar with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But because the United States has done this, that's why in less than 250 years, they've collapsed the economy 10, 15 times. That's worse than Rome. They've been trying to sneak slavery into every portion of everything they do this whole time. They keep collapsing their economies. They have to cheat their kids through college. And by they, I mean the wealthy elite that thinks slavery works energetically, just mathematically. It doesn't. You can't beat yourself to death to make yourself work harder
Mm-hmm.
and get something out of it. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're just going to
Yeah.
flip on yourself and turn into Harriet Tubman.
Wow. Yeah. And that whole time, in the time between, you didn't realize that
No.
was
And
the case. Yeah.
right. So blessed and highly favored. I'm not studying some university's piece of paper. I'm studying actual information.
Mm-hmm.
No one would even look up my credential. I got called my entire life for work, okay? I never stopped working.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It didn't do anything. I'm just saying it could have.
Oh yeah, totally. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Oh man, I could chat with you forever. But I should probably ask you my questions that I read each guest. We'll just have to set up another interview. I mean, but I'm curious to hear your answer to these questions. So, what brings joy or fun into your life?
Well, that's art. That is art. It is a release, a relief, and joy, you know.
Mm.
And, now that I'm a little older, I have several different forms. I'm an instrumentalist, I'm a vocalist, I write both fiction and non, and I'm a painter, I draw, I even consider my yoga practice a part of my art.
Mhm.
So that's what brings me joy. And that's just my personal joy. If I'm talking about true elation, I mean a choir, people that thought they couldn't sing, singing.
Mm. Yeah.
That for me is just the ultimate. I've directed a
Yeah.
few choirs in my life for non-pros, and that is incredible feeling.
Mhm.
Lots of joy. Yeah, music and art.
Yeah.
That's my
Yeah.
favorite.
That's great. I love that. My next question is, what would make you feel genuinely equal?
Oh, I feel. See, that's the problem. That question
Mm.
is such a good question.
Mm.
It is a fantastic question, really. And from my point of view, I have always felt equal. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? When I was 3 years old and my daddy was yelling at me, I was like, "You don't have a right to tell me that." You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I knew my rights in
Yeah.
my mind. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And as it pertains to living in the world and functioning in that way, I have always been equal. I have never allowed for anyone else to let me feel that way, unequal to them. I would laugh in your face.
Yeah.
The first thing to make me think we're not equal is when
Sure.
you think we're not.
Yeah.
So in the comparison to like systemic racism and systemic misogyny, I'm like, wow, I'm not exactly equal to that. I've gotten better than that, you know?
Mm.
So philosophically, in that sense, if you know people that are racist and misogynist, you're like, oh wow, I'm technically, mathematically, energetically better than you. I'm just more open. I'm able to process more information. It's like if I am a hydroelectric organic computing machine, I have way more bandwidth than you. I'm a better computer. You know what I mean?
Mm. Mhm.
I just
Yeah.
understand more stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, what would truly make me feel equal? I don't know. I think that's a question for others that don't,
Sure.
you
Yeah.
know, that don't think that yet, because I already do, right? And so it's the
Yeah.
business of America to like stop pretending, which is one of my favorite phrases.
Mm. Can you say that one more time?
Stop pretending,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. I appreciate that answer too to that
Yeah,
question. I
yeah.
appreciate your answer to that
Right
so
on,
much.
right
And,
on.
'cause I actually it's so interesting that that is your answer because just this week, I was looking at that question and going, "Well, that's kind of an like, it's kind of
Yeah,
an assumption," you know?
yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That's why it's such a great question. I love it. As an interviewer, I think it's a brilliant question.
I appreciate that. I literally I could talk to you forever, but I should probably wrap up. I would love to hear where listeners can find your work and find your book and all these things, but also if you have any businesses or organizations that you would like to share, I would love to hear those too.
I do. You can contact me directly at foodisfirst@gmail.com. A couple of organizations that I really want to shout out to are, of course, Langston Hughes Performing Arts Center. I was awarded a grant from them this year over the pandemic just for being a great artist, and I love that organization. They're
Me too.
amazing.
Mhm.
He's obviously one of my favorite poets, would be Langston Hughes,
Mm.
but also one of my favorite caterers here in Seattle that has inspired me in so many ways. Not only does she do like allergen-free cooking, but that brown girl can cook. She caters. I think they have a standalone restaurant now. It's a family black-owned business, and they're brilliant. I eat their food everywhere I go. It seems like everybody's using them out. NAM,
Mm.
the North American Museum of Art, and I was fortunate enough to be able to help write the grant for that new mural that Melvin Freeman put up there. I don't know if you've
Oh,
seen
okay.
it. The water. Well, that was the theme essentially, and there's this beautiful, gorgeous girl like putting a wave of information out onto the wall. It's this beautiful piece that Melvin and a few fabricators Seattle. And I wrote the grant for that and coached him on how to get that job. But it's also an amazing organization that I frequent. I'm a part of the
Mhm.
Black Farmers Collective as well,
Oh,
which
great.
is right now where Naima has Nurturing Roots. We've got Ray has Yes Farm, and then the Africatown Grow, which is at Columbia City location for Africatown, and a couple other gardens amongst the 900 and some non-black owned gardens
Right.
in Seattle. So I'm a part of that collective, and we Food is First does have a food bank, and I supply food to other pantries and to the homeless and all kinds of things around the city, and give nutrition lectures to low income folks.
Oh, that's great.
So those are the organizations. Oh yes, Path with Art. Path with Art. I also mentor and teach there right now. I have my Creative Mornings lecture on YouTube and a few other things. I was a part of
Mhm.
the band Sand Bloom for many years, and our music is still on radio, Spotify, blah blah blah.
Oh, great.
But beyond that, those are the people I want to shout out and give love to.
Lovely. Thank you. Awesome. We'll definitely post those folks on our website and where the podcast is and everything so people can find them easily, hopefully. So thank you for sharing that. I can't thank you enough for joining me, and I am so glad that you found us and that we
Me
got
too.
connected. Thank you so much for being on Take Notice. I really,
Me
really
too.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Can I give you one more
Yeah.
thing? There was a
Yeah.
professor, Dr. Tanya Pettiford
Mhm.
Waits, that was at Seattle Central. That was so important as far as
Mm.
our ways of knowing, that I think you'd be really interested in studying with as well.
Oh,
Just an
perfect.
FYI.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Great.
Mhm.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for Take Notice Amplifying Black Stories. Please subscribe and follow us on social media. We are at Take Notice Podcast. It would really help us out if you could take a couple of minutes to review our podcast. Thank you for your support. Take Notice Amplifying Black Stories is produced, hosted, and edited by Allison Preisinger-Heggins, co-produced by Amanda Ray. Music by Version Big 5 featuring Darius Higgins. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for taking notice.